Coming to get you, Bobber.
A Quiet Place Part 2 is the 2020 horror movie directed by John Krasinski, and it stars Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy and Noah Jupe. It pains me to say that this is a 2020 movie, even though it officially came out in 2021. I think most movies that were delayed due to COVID were officially classed as 2021 movies, but A Quiet Place, I think that's one of the only ones that still kept its 2020 release year when it comes to the years that movies officially should have came out. This one was highly anticipated for me. I loved the first movie. I had high hopes for the sequel, even though I didn't think it would be any better than the first movie because the first movie was so good. So when they did delay this movie, it had about 10 days till its release date in 2020, and then they had to cut it, and I'm like, oh, that's terrible, because I didn't see it happening, and I thought, okay, movies are getting delayed, but I think they'll bring out A Quiet Place Part 2 because it's just so close to the release date. But ultimately they didn't do that. I often wondered, I don't know if you thought this as well, but I often wondered what happened on day one. We go straight into like day 80 odds in the first movie. What happened from day one onwards? And I liked the way they done it in this one. They explained a lot for us without overfeeding us the information. It also gave us the opportunity to bring back John Krasinski again. I know that some movies bring back characters that died and they force it. They didn't force it in this one. It was so natural because a lot of what we were all thinking, what happened on day one, we got to see that, and obviously we get to see John Krasinski's character as well. So they brought him back in a nice way. Ultimately, he's not in the movie for the rest of the movie, but again, we get to see his character, because for me, his character was the best in the first film. We'll move on to the acting. Now, I loved the acting in the first film. And this one, the acting was probably on par. The acting was out of this world. We've got introduced to Cillian Murphy as well. I've been a massive fan of Cillian Murphy since 28 Days Later and Red Eye, and he doesn't disappoint in this film either. He's not a direct replacement for John Krasinski, because I think John Krasinski gives up just a little bit more heart. So he should, because it's his kids. Whereas in this one, Cillian Murphy's got nothing to do with the kids in this one, so his connection between them is not as big a bond as John Krasinski, but that doesn't take anything away from Cillian Murphy, because he was outstanding as well. Emily Blunt took a bit of a backseat in terms of her screen time from the first movie to this movie, but she was still incredible. But the person that stole the show for me was Noah Jupe. He didn't have a lot of screen time or a lot of things to do in the first film, but he was one of the big characters in this one, and he was absolutely incredible. The story felt different this time around. I think we've got a more advanced version of part one, because we're getting to know more about these things that are coming down from wherever they're coming from. We're getting to know their weaknesses, we're getting to know more about them. We get more dialogue in this one as well, because they do hide themselves in places where they can speak a little bit more. That's good, because although I do like the silence in the first film, I think we do need some dialogue. It brings the story along a bit. There's a little bit of a twist in the film as to what the alien beings are afraid of, or what they can't do. I won't mention that because this is a spoiler-free review, but that helps bring the story along, because there's more action and there's more tense scenes in it as well. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but for me it worked. Although this movie wasn't as quiet as the first movie, there are some scenes where John Krasinski brings in his director quality. There are some scenes where we hear, I think we do hear this in the first one as well, but not as much as the second one, where the daughter who's deaf, we get more of her point of view and what she's hearing in this film than we do in the first one. And there's some frightening scenes where you don't need any sound whatsoever, and it helps with the visual aspect of the film. I'll give you one example. You've got an example of hearing what she's hearing, which is absolutely nothing, and she's fell to the ground, and we don't know if she's made any noise. She doesn't know if she's made any noise, and then quite subtly in the background we see something coming towards her. That's all I'll say, but the way that part's shot, fantastic. It was always going to be hard to try and outdo a movie like A Quiet Place, because it was near impossible to do. Now, although this didn't outdo the first movie, it would be quite hard to do that, unfortunately, or fortunately for the first movie. But even though it didn't outdo it, it was still a fantastic film. I expected big things from part 2, and I got what I wanted. I got more than I asked for as well, to be honest. I think I liked this movie more than I expected to like it. I think it was an excellent film, not as good as the first one, but still excellent on its own. Something that makes this one stand on its own is the tone of the film, and I think that's what I like about this movie more, because we get more action scenes, we get more intense scenes, more chase scenes than we did in the first film. I do like the first film more, but when it comes to action scenes, part 2 wins it for that. But overall, part 1 is the best, but I still really like part 2. And in terms of the delay, I think this movie was definitely worth the wait. So if you guys have seen A Quiet Place Part 2, I'd definitely like to hear your thoughts, because I have heard people saying that they prefer part 2 more than part 1. I can see why some people would like that, but if you leave a comments down below, let me know what you like better, part 1, or part 2. As always guys, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, I'll see you soon, bye bye.